Wait, what? Okay. All right, guys, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties here, but I believe we are currently live here. So, what's going on, you guys? Welcome to my first live stream of Week 14. I'm going to be doing a question and answer like usual, and just like normal, this is going to be pretty much guided here by you guys, my viewers. So, if you guys have any questions, put those down in the chat, and I will get to those right away here. But I might have to end the stream and start it again because it's saying I'm logged out of YouTube right now, but I'm seeing questions pop up here in the live chat, so I'm just going to get rolling like we are underway here. So, Forgotten Ninja, he says he's got Swift or Dobbins in half PPR this week, and he wants me to pick two. And then in PPR, he's got Ridley, Allen Robinson, and Deontay Johnson. So, first off, I think that you definitely want to go with Deandre Swift this week if he's able to suit up and play against the Packers. He was limited in practice today, but he actually was out there with that illness, and he was able to go. Green Bay, great matchup. Deandre Swift, a very versatile guy, so I really like that. And then I would go with your wide receivers. It looks like you've got three options to pick from. I'd go with Allen Robinson this week. I think he's got a really great ceiling, and he's a really safe floor player as well, as always. My thoughts on MT for the rest of this season. Michael Thomas, I think, has a great schedule here. I'll pull it up for you guys. Michael Thomas in weeks 14 through 16 here has Philadelphia. Darius Slay was one of the top corners in the game, but he's been kind of burnt toast lately. And then he's got Kansas City. That should be a high-scoring matchup for him. And then Minnesota in the championship. That's kind of a personal game between those two teams, and I think that he can do really nicely in that matchup. So I like that option there. Michael Thomas, I think, is going to get back into being a wide receiver one here down the stretch. What are my thoughts on Nick Chubb, Wayne Gallman, and Myles Gaskin this week? Well, Nick Chubb, I think, is a RB1 right now, and a guy that can put up some really nice numbers. This week, the Browns are going up against the Ravens, so a bit of a tougher matchup, but I think if Cleveland can hang around in that game, obviously Nick Chubb's an RB1. And then Wayne Gallman, I really like this week against the Cardinals. I think he can put up some pretty solid numbers as well there, and he's been getting a high level of carries here. He's had over 10 touches in every game since week 7, and he's got 6 touchdowns here down the stretch. So, great option with Wayne Gallman. And then who was the last guy in there? Gaskin this week. I think Myles Gaskin can see a high workload this week against Kansas City. My only concern is that if the Dolphins get blown out, they might not see as much rushing attempts, but that defense is pretty solid, so they definitely got a chance there. Herbert versus Atlanta or Brady versus Minnesota this week. That's a tough one. I think these are both really good matchups, but I think ultimately I'd end up going with Justin Herbert against the Falcons. That defense has been steadily trending up, but regardless, I still think Herbert has the better matchup here. And the Falcons, like I said, have been getting better, but they're still not very talented in the secondary, and the guys that have talent are pretty young and inexperienced. So Keenan Allen should have a big day there, and Justin Herbert should be pretty well good off as well. Start Deontay Johnson or Corey Davis this week. Well, the Steelers have got the Bills, and that defense hasn't been quite as sound as they would have liked this season. And I think Deontay Johnson, getting the amount of targets he is in that offense right now, is a great option. So I would definitely go Deontay there, even though Corey Davis was very, very good last week. Wayne Gallman, J.K. Dobbins, Miles Sanders, Cam Akers this week as he's running back 2. I think I would go out there and lean on Wayne Gallman this week. Like I said, he's been getting involved highly since week 7, and he's got 10 or more total carries in all of those games from that point, and he had 5 receptions in his lowest game in terms of carries. So Wayne Gallman, 6 touchdowns here down the stretch as well. Since Saquon Barkley went down, I think he is a very solid lineup play, and this week against the Cardinals, I think is nothing to be worried about. So I'd go Wayne Gallman there. What are my thoughts on Raheem Mostert the rest of this season? Mostert, I think, is a guy who has a really high upside and a really great ceiling going forward here down the stretch, but I think his floor can be somewhat limited at times without a great starting level quarterback in that offense. Obviously, Nick Mullins does what he can, and he's kind of hit or miss on a week-to-week basis. But if Jimmy G was in that offense, I think we would have a little bit of a different conversation with Mostert having a little bit higher of a ceiling because they'd be in more games and a more competitive football team. But They do have their moments, and San Fran is still a trap team. They're definitely a team that can run the football against Dallas and Arizona in weeks 15 and 16, but this week against Washington, I'd be a bit nervous about. Thanks, John. It says keep up the good work here. Appreciate your support, man. Glad to have you here on the channel. What's up, Time Turner? Glad you stopped by here on the stream. Glad to see you out and about here. Who do you start at flex this week? Corey Davis, Cole Beasley, or Debo Samuel in week 14? Evan, I think that I would go with here. Let's see who these guys have in their matchups. The Bills have got the Steelers, so I think that Cole Beasley could see a nice game. Obviously, he's coming off a monster performance, and I think he's one of the more safe options in that offense right now, to be honest. He's definitely the shocker of the fantasy season in terms of a guy who was a waiver wire pickup at the wide receiver position and is playing like a great level producer right now. I think you could definitely go that route. I think he'll see a high number of targets and have a pretty safe floor here. Corey Davis this week against the Jags, I think, is solid as well, but he's going to see some less volume. A.J. Brown is the number one in that offense, and in a heavy run offense, I think that the passing volume, there's just not too much to go around. So he's a decent stream at flex, but and then Debo Samuel for the 49ers against Washington, I'd stay away from that one. Washington's playing some pretty darn good defense right now, so I think I'd go Cole Beasley there. Pick 2.5 PPR, Deontay Johnson, Allen Robinson, or Calvin Ridley. And this week, the Falcons have the Chargers. I think Julio Jones, even though he's banged up, I think he's starting to recover, but will draw the toughest part of coverage in that offense. So I think I'd go with Ridley there. And then at that other spot, I'd go with Allen Robinson against the Texans, who are without their top corner right now, Bradley Roby, because he got suspended with Will Fuller for those PEDs. So I think that's a great matchup for Allen Robinson, who's already got a great floor every week. Amari Cooper this week or Cooper Kupp. Let's see who Dallas has on the schedule for week 14. They've got the Bengals. So, sorry, you guys. Getting into the streams here, I'm always a bit rusty on who the matchups are, even though I've already recorded my must-start running backs list and receivers video for tomorrow. But anyways, I think I'd go with Cooper Kupp. I think that is a slot wideout game for the Rams, and I think that's where they're going to find the best matchups. Amari Cooper is going to draw the top coverage from the Bengals, which is William Jackson, who's having an underrated season. And I think Amari Cooper could see his numbers come down a bit. I think he performed pretty poorly against Baltimore, if I recall correctly. Let's see, Amari Cooper. Coop got in the end zone, actually, in that game, so he ended up turning it around from what I saw. But anyways, Cooper Kupp, I think that we're going to see Robert Woods struggle on the outside there with Stephon Gilmore, and then J.C. Jackson on the other side is very solid as well. So when Cooper Kupp gets involved in that slot game, I think that's where the Rams are going to see the most upside in the passing game. Thoughts on Miles Sanders this week and Chris Carson? Miles Sanders is not a guy I want in lineups this week. We have not seen Doug Peterson and that Eagles coaching staff be willing to give him the work here down the stretch. And against the Saints defense that is number 1 or 2 right now against the run, that's definitely not a matchup you want to go against. Last week, he only had 10 carries against the Packers, which is just not going to cut it in a really, really great matchup. So he should have seen a lot more touches in that game, and I'm really disappointed that he didn't. So against a really tough run stop this week, you don't want anything to do with Sanders, especially with a switch at quarterback play. And then Chris Carson, I think he's got a pretty good ceiling. He's been finding the end zone a lot this year, but Pete Carroll said his foot is not 100% right now, so I would be a bit cautious on Chris Carson and not just lock him in as an automatic start. And I would definitely consider your other lineup options, even though they are playing the Jets. So definitely a high ceiling, but I think that foot injury kind of lowers his floor a bit. Jefferson, Deontay Johnson, Terry McLaurin, Cooper Kupp, and PPR need to. And then for your flex, Swift, Jonathan Taylor, Gaskin, or one of the receivers that doesn't start. And then he's wondering about Herbert or Tannehill. So for your 2 wideouts, I would definitely go with Jefferson this week against the Bucs. I think that'll be a high scorer, and I've actually got him on my must-start wide receivers list for this week. I think that Minnesota is going to struggle to find run lanes against Tampa Bay's front, and they're going to have to resort to passing a bit more, and Kirk Cousins is going to have to air it out. So Jefferson, a pencil in for me there. And then Washington has the 49ers, so maybe a bit of hesitation on McLaurin after that game, but I think ultimately I'd still end up going with him, but it's a close second between him and Deontay Johnson. And then for your flex, I would definitely go with Deandre Swift. Against the Packers, I think he has a pretty darn good ceiling and is a guy that can put up some really ridiculous numbers if he's able to come back and get the full starting workload. So The Packers run stop, not great this year, and they have allowed some shiftier backs to do some damage to them. So I would definitely go with Swift there. Cardinals defense versus the Giants or Seattle versus the Jets. No, that's a good question. I think I would end up going Seattle if you have to pick one of these two. The Cardinals defense against the Giants will probably be facing Daniel Jones this week, which obviously increases the output we're going to see offensively from the Giants. And then Seattle, obviously the Jets are one of the worst offensive teams in football. So I think that the Seahawks, who have been upping their blitz game lately, and we've been seeing a little bit more of a pass rush out of them, can maybe get some opportunistic picks or fumble recoveries and get you some free points there. Pick one flex: Robbie Anderson, Brandon Ayuk, Corey Davis, James Conner, or Raheem Mostert. That's another tough one this week. If Robbie Anderson is able, actually Robbie Anderson will be playing. He is the one Panthers wide receiver, I believe, that is not on the COVID IR list right now. Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore did land on that list this week. But that pretty much leaves Robbie Anderson left if he's the only guy able to go against the Broncos. So I think you probably go Robbie Anderson there. I mean, he's been Teddy's favorite target all season long, and he's probably going to get peppered this week without anyone else in the lineup potentially. Calvin Ridley or Deontay Johnson this week. That's a tough one. I think both of them have somewhat medium style matchups here. I think Calvin Ridley will get the better situation from a coverage standpoint against LA in comparison to his teammate Julio. I think Jones will draw probably either Casey Hayward or another one of those top guys on the outside, and then Ridley will be left to work with whatever's left. And I think that they could also get in a high score with Justin Herbert putting up a lot of points against that Atlanta defense. So I would say in standard leagues, maybe you want to go for Ridley, and in PPR, Johnson, just because of how many targets we're seeing Deontay get lately. Going into the game against the Washington football team, Deontay Johnson led his team by 10 targets, and he missed a game this season. So obviously both of those guys are great wide receivers, but I think I'd go maybe Ridley by a hair if it's standard, and like I said, Johnson in PPR. Does Drew Brees play this week? I have not seen any reports indicating that he is 100% ready to go, but the Saints organization is optimistic that he will play. I'll look it up for you guys right now one more time. But I hope that he does, because obviously being an Alvin Kamara owner, that's huge for his lineup value, and I think that can be big news for all fantasy leagues. Let's see here. Drew Brees. All I've seen this week is that they are hoping he can return. He did not practice today, so that's something big to keep an eye on. I would say if he doesn't practice by Friday, we're probably not going to see Brees this week, but there's definitely a chance we see him if he gets into the practice field by then. Rivers versus the Raiders, Stafford versus the Packers, or Carr versus the Colts this week. Cole, I think I would end up actually going with Matt Stafford against Green Bay. We've seen teams be able to put up a lot of yards against the Packers this season, and their red zone defense has been atrocious this year. So even if he's not able to have Kenny Gallaudet out there this week, I think Deandre Swift coming back helps that offense get more balanced and be more productive as a whole. And then we saw Stafford throw for over 400 yards against Chicago last week. So I think he's finally starting to hit his stride here, and Green Bay is a pretty dang good matchup for him. Carson, Mostert, Woods, Cooper, or Gallman for your flex this week. I think this one, in terms of matchups and the guys that I think have the most upside, would go towards Carson and Gallman. But like I talked about just a couple minutes ago, Chris Carson has a foot injury and is not 100% right now. So maybe you lean more towards Wayne Gallman. He's been getting some workhorse numbers here lately and a high touchdown count, so I think he's got a really safe floor against the Cardinals, and I'd go that route. You've got both A.J. Brown and Corey Davis, and you're wondering if you play Davis in your flex or play both Marvin Jones or Cam Akers. Okay, so typically I don't like to invest and play two wide receivers from the same team in my lineup, because more often than not, only one of the guys is actually going to produce the numbers, and the other guy is going to be left off, kind of scraping at the bottom of the barrel for targets. Last week even, I mean, we saw Corey Davis go nuts against the Browns, and then A.J. Brown only had 4 receptions. He still was able to get like 80 yards, but it was nothing fantastic. But I think ultimately I would probably go towards either Jones or Akers over Corey Davis. Marvin Jones has been playing really, really good without Gallaudet in the lineup, so I think you could definitely go that route. And Jair Alexander has not been playing quite as good as he was earlier on this season for the Packers, so Maybe not an absolute lockdown matchup there. And I would be surprised if he even shadowed Jones around the field in that game anyways. So I think you go Marvin Jones there this week. He's got a pretty nice ceiling, I would say, but maybe not the safest floor. You've got a bye in the playoffs this week, and you are dropping Austin Hooper for Noah Fant. Tight ends are so bad this season. Yeah, congrats on the bye, first of all. Obviously, you probably had a great season to this point if you got that far. And I definitely support the move to drop Austin Hooper. He's been far too inconsistent, and from the player he was on the Falcons roster to what he is now with the Browns, it's like night and day, and he's a very touchdown-dependent play. In terms of tight ends being bad this season, I think there is definitely a tier system almost. You've got your top 3 guys at the top, your Darren Wallers, your Travis Kelce's, your Mark Andrews, that are clearly those top guys. And then you've got a little bit of a middle pack of guys who are significantly involved in their offense, but don't see quite the volume that you would expect out of those top guys or the touchdown production. So they're safe plays, but not great. And then at the bottom, it's just a laundry list of streaming options and guys that aren't fantastic. So I think that's going to be something really interesting for me in my research here this offseason to really find out what the correlation is between top-end tight ends and winning fantasy teams. So that's something I'm definitely going to dive into and I think would be interesting to look at here. Is Miles Sanders startable for week 15 and 16? Also, can I play Mixon if he comes back next week? If Joe Mixon comes back next week, I would absolutely consider him, but I would be cautious because running backs coming back off an injury that's significant and missing that much time definitely do not receive a full workload in their first game back. In terms of Miles Sanders in weeks 15 and 16, I think he's startable. Maybe as a low-end RB2 with high upside, but a very shaky floor or a flex play at that. This week, though, nothing to do with Miles Sanders against the Saints. It's going to be a brutal matchup. And for a guy who can produce last week against a top-end matchup, I think that he's in big trouble. Hang on a second, guys. My stream just scrolled me down here, and I don't want to skip over any of you guys. I'm looking for that last comment. Okay, here we go. Amari Cooper, Robert Woods, Corey Davis, Deontay Johnson, pick 3 in PPR leagues. Okay, so obviously Deontay Johnson being a target hog in that Steelers offense definitely gets a lock-in for me here. Robert Woods, I would be a little bit skeptical of this week if he's probably going to see some matchup and opportunity against Stephon Gilmore, but obviously that's not a great matchup and a guy who was the defensive player of the year last season, so I would not be enthused about that. I think Amari Cooper against the Bengals has some upside there, so I think honestly the odd man out for me is Robert Woods, even though Corey Davis I think has a bit of a shaky floor. I still think he has more upside than Woods does against the Pats this week. Standard league, pick 2 running backs, Gallman, Gaskin, Swift, and Dobbins. So for your running backs, Jack, I'm going to go with Wayne Gallman. I really love his floor here the rest of the season, or as long as we don't see Devonta Freeman in the lineup. And then at your other running back spot, I'd go with Deandre Swift if he comes back this week, because against the Packers, I think that's a great matchup and a guy who can put up a really big production total. He can get it done as a rusher and receiver, and he's finding the end zone. He's getting a lot of yards after catch. I really like Deandre Swift. I think he's a league winner for a lot of teams the rest of the season. And then at your wide receiver spot, I only get to pick one here, I guess. I think it's between Godwin and Anderson. Robbie Anderson, kind of the only guy left in that Panthers offense after Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore got placed on the COVID list. But ultimately, I think I would go with Chris Godwin because I think the floor is safer. They can't really key in on Godwin, and that secondary in Minnesota is not good at all. So I think that you'd stay away from Anderson in that situation. But should you drop Kenny Gallaudet? No, I would hang on to him just because you would hate to see him come back. A contending team picks him up. He has a great week and knocks someone out of the playoffs. So I think you hang around with him. If you've got an IR spot, it makes that a lot easier, obviously. But I think he's still worth the roster spot if he gets back on the field because he's been a really solid option throughout his career. But obviously this season he has struggled big time with injuries and not been out there hardly at all this season. Pick 2, Devontae Parker, Miles Sanders, Devin Singletary, J.K. Dobbins, and Cam Akers. That's a tough one. I think automatically I'm going to have to go out there and start J.K. Dobbins. He was very impressive for the second straight game for him where he's been eligible to play, and he got done against the Dallas Cowboys on Tuesday night. And then I think the other option I would really strongly consider going Cam Akers here. over Devontae Parker. I would rule out Miles Sanders this week. I just don't think he's got a great ceiling this week, and I think the floor is really shaky. But Miami's got the Chiefs this week, so I guess you could go with Devontae Parker, but the Chiefs have actually been extremely underrated, and I don't think people realize how good they are against passing teams. So I'd go with your 2 running backs there. What's up, Traven? Happy to see you on the stream, man. Glad you're tuning in today. And then Cole is wondering again, Ravens D versus the Browns or Panthers against the Broncos. If this was the same Browns football team we saw week 1, I think this would be a really easy decision. Obviously, the Ravens whooped up on Cleveland and shut them out in week 1. And that was a brutal game for Baker Mayfield and that team. But I think right now, with what we're seeing from Cleveland offensively, they've really found their identity, and that makes it hard to start a defense against them, especially after what we saw them do to Tennessee last week. But I don't know. The Panthers D has had its cracks. I think they've got some pass rushers there that can get after the quarterback, and that Denver offense has been pretty darn bad. And Drew Lock has thrown some careless picks and struggled to keep drives moving along. So I think that's a bit of a toss-up, honestly. I guess maybe I'd go with the Ravens D just because they have a little bit better personnel, but I think it's very close. James Conner, Myles Gaskin, Ronald Jones, pick 2 for your PPR team. So PPR, I think, kind of, in a sense, wants me to eliminate James Conner. Myles Gaskin, I really like his ability to get a lot of touches in that offense, but if they do fall behind against the Chiefs, I'd be slightly worried about him. So I think I'd still pick him here over Conner. And then Ronald Jones, I really like his ceiling the rest of the year. I wish he would get more carries than he does because he's a very talented back and a guy who is just a hammer for that football team. So I think I'd go with Ronald Jones, but definitely not a shoo-in. Do you think I should go with Stephon Diggs, wide receiver 1, and Julio Jones at my wide receiver 2, and then Beasley at my flex, or Brandon Cooks? It just seems that Allen really targets Beasley like crazy. All right, well, I think that, yes, Cole Beasley has been fantastic for that offense, but I also think that this week Brandon Cooks is going to do very nicely against Chicago. We saw, obviously, Aaron Rodgers just tore up Chicago 2 weeks ago, and then the Lions were able to do the same thing last week. So I obviously, Deshaun Watson being one of the more talented quarterbacks in the league, I think can clearly get it done, and Brandon Cooks is the number 1 option on that team. So I think you go with Cooks against that Bears defense, and I think you keep Diggs and Julio in there. But Beasley is a great 4th option to have for your team. Mark thinks that Kenny. Are you saying, Mark, you think that Gallaudet is going to return for a Christmas game? I guess I could see him coming back. Probably not this week. Right now, he's not practicing, but I think he might be able to return next week potentially, or in the championship game if that. But he probably doesn't warrant lineup spots at that point. What's up, Draven? Again, do you think the Ravens defense is a start this week against the Browns, or should I pick up a defense off the waivers? If I should, there's the Cardinals, Washington, many others. Sorry for the long answer. No worries, Alex. I think this week Arizona against. I keep forgetting who these teams play here. Arizona against the Giants. It could be a solid stream, especially if Daniel Jones doesn't play. If Daniel Jones isn't on the field, then obviously you do this 100%. But I think the Ravens are still your best bet there because they have the secondary players that can take the football away from Baker, and we saw them have a high-level performance in Week 1. So I think you kind of look at the past to see how they might play this up-and-coming game. Obviously, it's not going to be the same result or as good of a result, but I think the Ravens can still get it done. Should I play CMC if he plays? My other running backs are Kamara, Carson, Mostert, and Gallman. Obviously, Kamara gets that first spot. He's a lock-in, and you should not tamper with that part of your lineup. I think he definitely deserves probably that third spot, though. CMC is on track to play right now. I'd put Gallman in that last spot as a safe floor play, just in case we don't see a great game from McCaffrey, but I'd be shocked to see him underwhelm this week. He's had over 20 points in fantasy in every scoring format in every game he's played this season. Cam Akers, David Johnson, or Wayne Gallman, half PPR. I'm going to have to go with Wayne Gallman. I'm on the Wayne Gallman train this week. I think he's going to continue to be very dependable and a great start for teams. He's been great in his time without Barkley in that offense. Like I've said many times in the stream already, we've only been going for a few minutes here, but Gallman's got 6 touchdowns since week 7, and he's got only one game with 10 carries, and the rest of that he's got over that count. So Wayne Gallman's got a great floor. You traded Myles Gaskin for Allen Robinson, Robbie Anderson, Nyheim Hines in full PPR. Is this a dub or an L? All right, well, if all you gave up was Myles Gaskin, that is absolutely a win. Nyheim Hines in full PPR is just below Myles Gaskin in terms of RB2 producers, I think. Myles Gaskin gets great volume, but he's not exactly the highest ceiling play. Allen Robinson, I think, is one of the safest floor plays in the league at the wide receiver position. And Robbie Anderson is Teddy Bridgewater's favorite target in that Carolina offense. So, absolutely, you won this trade. You got the best value. And honestly, those 2 wide receivers might even be the best players involved. So, if you were able to do that, that's a great trade for you. Pick 3, Christian McCaffrey, James Robinson, Myles Gaskin, Nick Chubb, and David Montgomery for Week 14. That's a pretty loaded group, so that's a tough decision for me here. I think, obviously, CMC, he's been great all season long, even after returning for just one game against the Chiefs earlier this year. And then the Jags this week have the Titans. So James Robinson is an easy start there. One of my top guys the rest of the season going forward at the running back position. And then Nick Chubb against the Ravens, I think, can have a very solid game. But obviously, if we see Baltimore get up to a huge lead, his production might be lowered a little bit. So if you think about it from that aspect, I could see you rationalizing going David Montgomery in a great matchup against Houston this week. The Texans have been awful against the run stop, and David Montgomery has 4 touchdowns in his last 2 games. So I think rest of season, Nick Chubb is far and away the better player here. But based off of how the rest of your lineup is constructed, I could see it being a reasonable idea to at least consider Montgomery. Drake Gallman or Melvin Gordon at your running back 2 in PPR this week. Once again, Wayne Gallman here. I think that Kenyon Drake is touchdown dependent, and he's not the most efficient running back in the league. He's definitely a solid player and a guy that is a decent RB2, but I think Wayne Gallman is far safer and less touchdown dependent and a much more efficient player. Last week, we saw him, he had 135 yards rushing, and his carries weren't all that crazy either. It was a nice 18, I believe, 16 carries for 135 for Gallman against the Seahawks. That's a great clip for a running back, especially a handcuff player. So Wayne Gallman deserves his respect. All right, I just got scrolled down again here, so I got to find my spot so I don't skip over anybody. Will Miles Sanders ever make a fantasy starting lineup again this season? I think this is situational, Ernest. It varies team to team. I think in 12-team leagues and deeper leagues, you definitely consider Miles Sanders after this week if your season is still continuing as a RB2 with a high upside or as a somewhat safe flex play. I would say at that point he is worth the flex spot. But Miles Sanders against the Saints, absolutely not. He should not be started in any leagues this week, regardless of how deep your scoring format is. You can find better options out there. He's so talented. He's got burst. We've seen him run for 70 yards in back-to-back games this season against the Ravens and the Steelers. I mean, he just needs the ball more. Doug Peterson is foolish for not giving him more carries in that offense, more touches, and whenever Carson Wentz tried to check the ball down to him, he sailed it over his head and threw like 3 picks this year targeting Miles Sanders on a flat route. So he definitely has a ceiling going forward, and I think this coming fantasy season in 2021, he'll be a better player, but right now, he's just not consistent enough or dependable enough to start in the playoffs. I do really like his schedule, though, after New Orleans, so something to consider. Pick 3, James Robinson, Kamara, Swift, Sanders, and Dobbins. This week, I'm definitely going to have to go with Kamara, Robinson against the Titans, and Deandre Swift. Swift against the Packers, love the matchup. Robinson against the Titans, another matchup I love. And then Kamara is a must-start player. And especially if Drew Brees comes back, then his value is going to go through the roof. Pick 2, Montgomery, Gallman, Mostert, and Connor. I'm going to go with Montgomery and Gallman this week. I've been talking up Wayne Gallman all stream long, it seems like. I basically might as well have named this stream the Wayne Gallman Q&A session. And then David Montgomery is also a guy who will be featured in my top 5 must-start running backs list tomorrow. So definitely a great option there. You've got Dobbins as well, Andrews. I would still go with Montgomery and Gallman. Should I start Devontae Booker or DJ Chark? I think Chark's got a nice opportunity this week against the Titans, but it's just going to be a matter if Mike Glennon can give him the ball or not. I've actually seen him kind of defer to, I don't know, James Robinson is clearly the bell cow on that offense, and the offense kind of goes as he does. But I don't necessarily love Chark as much anymore without Minshew or a quarterback that airs it out as much anymore. Devontae Booker and the Raiders, though, I think Booker will certainly get the workload to command the question of being a starter, but that front for Indy is very solid. I think overall, though, I would probably go with Booker just because we know we're gonna see more opportunities for him. He might have a slightly safer floor. What's up, Sid the Kid? Glad to see you around here on the channel. Hope you hit the sub button, Sydney. I'm counting on you, man. What's up, Draven again? Just checking in the stream here. Should I start Deshaun Watson or Mitch Trubisky? Tom, I would definitely go with Deshaun Watson this week over Mitchell Trubisky. We've seen quarterbacks the last 2 weeks in Aaron Rodgers and Matt Stafford, who are also very talented guys, just like D-Watt, absolutely carve up that Bears defense. I know the Texans defense is bad as well, but Trubisky just does not have the ceiling that Watson does. And we saw Watson able to find a reliable option in Kiki QT last week. So there is players on that Texans roster that can step up and try and fill that void of Will Fuller's absence. So Cooks as well. Brandon Cooks, a very talented player on that offense. I really like Watson going forward. And with that rushing value, I think he can be a really solid play still down the stretch. Sid the Kid, no, do not tell Tom to start Mitch Trubisky. That is not the way to go, Sydney. Okay, we've just got a bunch of Mitchell Trubisky fans here in the chat, it looks like. Tom is wondering about... Oh, my chat scrolled again. Chark, Claypool, or Corey Davis this week. I think this is a situation, honestly, where I would go with Corey Davis just because despite the fact he's not going to see too much volume in Tennessee with A.J. Brown there, and obviously the Derrick Henry workload is going to be extremely high, I think you still go with Corey Davis because the play-action game is going to be there. Derrick Henry has owned the Jags, so they're going to be all up in the box, and he might find himself wide open for a score. So low floor for Corey Davis this week, but the ceiling is really, really nice. Start 2, Kamara, Eckler, Connor, Gaskin, PPR. This one's easy. Go with Eckler and Kamara. Kamara, a must-start player each and every single week, Cooper. And then Austin Eckler against the Falcons has a bit of a tough front he's going against here, but I think Eckler, in the end, his receiving volume that we see is too good. Sydney is wondering this week, is it better off starting Aaron Rodgers at Detroit or Wilson against the Jets at home? That's a great question, Sid. Obviously, you were in a great spot in your fantasy league if you got those two at your quarterback position. I think I would go with Aaron Rodgers, though. In 2 back-to-back games with not horrid matchups, Russell Wilson only has 14 points in his last 2 outings. I'll pull up his stats here, but he's been underwhelming, especially considering what he has to work with offensively. And Aaron Rodgers has just kind of been rolling through anyone put in front of him. The Colts were the top defense in the league until Aaron Rodgers kind of cooked them up and tore them to pieces. Obviously, they lost that game in overtime, but at Philadelphia, Russell Wilson, that's not a terribly great unit. They've got a good front, but on the back end, they're a bit weaker. Russ, though, only had 230 yards passing and 1 touchdown. And then against the Giants, a better matchup and a tougher team defensively, but still a matchup that you can win against. Only had 263 and a touchdown with 1 fumble and 1 pick. So Wilson's not quite hitting the marks that he was early on this season. I think Rodgers is the way to go this week. Brandon Cooks or Amari Cooper for Week 14 in PPR. I think I'd go with Brandon Cooks, honestly. Deshaun Watson is the more reliable quarterback and the guy that gives Cooks the higher upside. Cooper is no doubt the more talented player, and if Dak was in the lineup this week, I would 100% pick Amari, but obviously Dak hasn't been there with that huge injury early on in the season, so I like Cooks' upside against the Bears, though. Winning you're in, losing you're out, and my opponent is tough. You've got Josh Jacobs, and you're wondering if you would trade Jacobs for Hill. Oh, and Hill for Henry and Robbie Anderson. Here's my advice to you, man. Derrick Henry is my running back 1 for the rest of the fantasy season and the playoffs here. His schedule is great. He's got Green Bay, Detroit, and Jacksonville this week, which are all great matchups against the run. So I think you do this trade. I mean, Tyreek Hill, obviously one of the better wide receivers out there, but Derrick Henry can give you that edge you're looking for. I expect some huge yardage productions for him. Excuse me. Wow, I expect some huge yardage production from him the rest of the year and a very nice touchdown count. So, and then Robbie Anderson is a dependable low-end wide receiver 1 option to high-end wide receiver 2 option with Carolina and being one of the favorite targets in that offense. JC1026, I traded Glennon for CMC. Did you win the trade? Yeah, big dub there, man. Obviously, that's a joke, though. Anyone know any tight ends that might do better than Austin Hooper this week? Tom, I don't mean to be blunt, but I think that almost anyone could be a better option than Hooper. He's been very inconsistent and not nearly the player he was with the Falcons. I mean, very disappointing guy. I think Austin Hooper was actually being drafted at a somewhat decent spot in leagues this year. Only tight end 25. So if you're in a 12-team league, he is a tight end 3. So just about anyone, Tom. You can go find a lot of options there. Put some options for me down in the chat, and I'll get back to you with some guys to go pick up. Deontay Johnson and Robert Woods full PPR. I am definitely going with DJ this week. His floor is very nice in PPR leagues because of how many targets he gets in that offense, and he is definitely looking like Big Ben's favorite target right now for that team. Robert Woods, I love his floor every week, but I think his ceiling is very limited, though, against Stephon Gilmore in that Pats defense. Oops. Gosh, my stream chat's being really buggy tonight, and I keep scrolling down my list. Pick 1 running back, Jonathan Taylor, Raheem Mostert, or Clyde Edwards-Helaire. This week I'd go JT. He is on my top 5 must-start running backs list that'll be coming out tomorrow morning. JT, I really like his matchup against the Raiders this week. They have not been a good unit defensively in any aspect of the game, and JT's coming off his best game of the year, so 100% go that route. Full PPR, pick a flex, Chubb, Swift, or the one you don't choose between Deontay and Robert Woods. Okay, I picked Deontay Johnson, but I'm still going to stay away from Robert Woods, and I would definitely go with Swift against the Packers. I think that's a high upside matchup and a really safe floor play as well. So Swift is one of my favorite running backs the rest of the season. Will Jalen Hurts unlock Miles Sanders after the Saints game for the rest of the playoffs? That's a great question, Justin. And actually, I believe, Justin, you've been around here for quite a while. I feel like I remember you way back from my days at like 20 subs or so. So shout out to you, man. I think that Jalen Hurts definitely, though, has a chance to unlock Miles Sanders. I think the turnover rate will be much lower for that Eagles offense. Hopefully, as a Miles Sanders owner, that's what I'm hoping for. But it's a matter of if the coaching staff will give him the ball enough. I think if they try and run some option stuff, I'm not really sure that is the quarterback Jalen Hurts is. He's definitely a mobile guy, but if we see some read option stuff, we could see the ball in Miles Sanders' hands a little bit more, and I like those matchups. So definitely some room for improvement, though, for Miles Sanders in weeks 15 and 16. Is Kamara for Hill a good trade? I'm assuming you mean Tyreek Hill. If it's Taysom Hill, absolutely not. Taysom Hill's not going to be a starter here for much longer. If not, his time might already be over as the starter if Brees comes back this week. But if it is Tyreek Hill, I'm still going to say no, because with Brees returning to the lineup here hopefully very soon, Kamara becomes a top 1 to 2 running back in fantasy again. Matthew says, Tom, if you're still watching the stream, Matthew says Logan Thomas is probably a solid option out there. Yes, he is a very good option. Definitely a guy who is available on the waiver wire in a lot of leagues, and a guy who's probably my favorite stream player throughout the season so far. He's made my waiver wire list probably like 4 or 5 times this season because he's put up really solid games and has 5 touchdowns. Just not the most highly coveted guy. Finally, my playoffs start this week, but my matchup is tough. My opponent has Deshaun Watson, Tyler Lockett, Tyreek Hill, Rojo, Miles Sanders, Kamara, Hunter Henry in the Saints defense. Justin, I've got some good news for you, my friend. Tyler Lockett has been extremely hot and cold this year. He can either score 35 on you, or he's probably going to score between 6 and 7. I mean, obviously a great talent. Russell Wilson and him go way back. Those guys have a great combination, but you could get him on a good week here when he has a quiet game and Lockett underproduces. Miles Sanders, I think that works to your advantage. He's going to have a quiet game against the Saints, and then I could also see a tight end like Hunter Henry, who I think has a decent floor. He still has the potential to have a catchless game or a 1 to 2 catch game. And then Rojo and that Tampa offense, you never know what they're going to do with the running backs. So you definitely got a chance, man. Bro, love your channel. You're awesome. Easily the best fantasy channel on YouTube. Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. I don't know if I'm quite to the level of being the best fantasy channel on YouTube, but obviously I strive to be the best I can for you guys and put out the best content that I can here. So I'm really looking forward to the offseason. I'm looking to make some big improvements here on the channel and make some big moves here to get you guys some really great stuff in the draft guide next year and some really great content in the offseason. So stick around for that. If you guys haven't ever played Dynasty Fantasy Football, I highly encourage you guys to. I think that is something that would be awesome to get a lot of you guys into this season and something that I would really like to specialize in the off-season period of fantasy. So that's something I'm really looking forward to. Rank from worst to best, we've got Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, and Ryan Tannehill. I'm going to have to put Tannehill at the bottom of the list here. I love all three of those guys, but Ryan Tannehill, just because of the passing volume in Tennessee, gets a little bit of a lower rank for me. Obviously, their first priority is to hand the ball off to Derrick Henry, so he gets kicked down a little bit for me, but still a great top 12 quarterback option the rest of the season. And then it gets a little dicey between Lamar and Watson. I think Lamar has the better playoff schedule here, and I think is a guy who has a very high upside, and we can see start to kind of get back to those MVP numbers from 2019 last year, where he was a real steal in fantasy. And then Deshaun Watson, the schedule's a bit tougher, but it's kind of Deshaun or nothing for that Texans team. I'd probably put Deshaun slightly ahead just because he's a better passer than Lamar, and even without Fuller has better options to throw the football to. So I would go Deshaun 1, Lamar 2, and Tannehill at 3. Oops. I keep scrolling down, man. This is killing me here. Boyd, Higgins, or Davis this week. I actually really like Tyler Boyd as a stream. 72-yard touchdown grab on one catch against the Dolphins last week before he got ejected. And against the Dallas defense this week with an atrocious secondary, I think has a really nice game. So I really like that option. Sneaky play there. Start to David Montgomery, Chubb, and James Robinson. James Robinson has to be a lock against Tennessee. Teams have been able to find their way running the football against them. And David Montgomery, I think, deserves at least some consideration to be started over Nick Chubb. But I 100%, I can't fault you if you do start Chubb, even in a tougher game against Baltimore. It's a ballsy move to put Montgomery in over him, but I think it's something you consider just because the matchup is so good. And Montgomery's riding some momentum in a bit of a hot streak right now. Ravens or 49ers, and Lutz or Gano. Oh, man, we've got some kicker advice here for Jack Johnson. In terms of defense this week, I think you go with the 49ers defense against Washington. I think that they might be more prone to mistakes offensively and having a lower scoring output. And then for kickers, the Saints had the Eagles this week. They're probably going to move the football pretty efficiently and have their way. Will Lutz is one of the best accuracy kickers in the league, who's also got some power there. I think you go Will Lutz. Amari Cooper, Devontae Parker, Corey Davis, or Mostert. It seems like you might only have one option here. If that is the case and you've only got one spot in your lineup, I think I would end up giving it to probably Amari Cooper. I mean, the Bengals are going to be in a the game is probably going to be close, unfortunately. Those are two teams struggling right now. And despite Cooper seeing probably the toughest coverage in that game, I think he'll still put up better numbers than those other guys. As you know, you've got Justin Herbert, Deontay Johnson, Chris Godwin, Adam Thielen, Zeke, Drake, Kareem Hunt, Noah Fant, Tampa's D. Do you think you should sit Kareem Hunt? All right. So your running back options are Zeke, Drake, and Hunt. And then you've got 3 wide. Yeah, I think you do. If you're only in a one flex league, I think those wide receivers are going to do you better off this week than Kareem Hunt will. I think Zeke is a decent start this week because the matchup isn't terrible against Cincinnati. I think the game script will allow him to have 4 meaningful quarters in that game rather than being blown out after 2.5. So, and then Drake, a guy who's been in the end zone a lot lately after Kyler Murray's rushing attempts have gone down here. So I think Hunt's the odd man out against Baltimore. Fant or Goddard this week. Let's see who Denver has. I don't think it really matters, though, because the Saints are on a hot streak right now defensively, and I don't really like playing players against them right now. Yeah, Broncos at Carolina. I think Fant's the better option. Goddard in any other week I'd pick over him, but the Saints right now are playing fantastic defense. Ryan Tannehill, Lamar Jackson, or Deshaun Watson at the quarterback position this week for you. Since the Ravens are a bit more of a ground and pound team and Lamar gets the majority of his work done on the ground, I think I'm going to go Deshaun Watson by a hair here this week. Lamar could hit a deep ball or two to Hollywood Brown. Mark Andrews coming back to the lineup could help his value, but Deshaun Watson is more of a pure passer who also has the elite option of his legs in his game, and I think against Chicago can't get those numbers, so I go D-Watt by a bit over Lamar. Kyler Murray or Phillip Rivers this week. So the Colts have the Raiders, and Kyler Murray and the Cardinals are playing. Oh man, I really need to start memorizing these because in my next Q&A video, it should go a lot more smoothly with me just remembering these off the top of my head. But they've got the Giants. I'd go Phil Rivers, and that really hurts to say that, but Kyler Murray, he's been struggling. His shoulder is clearly bothering him. And James Bradbury's playing some really good football right now. He's obviously not going to completely take Hopkins out of it, but I think Hopkins isn't probably going to go over 100 in a touchdown, which is kind of grown standard for him. But Rivers is going to have the opportunity to hit freebie deep balls. I mean, the Jets did it against the Raiders, so if they can, Phil Rivers can too. Murray's rushing value has gone down significantly as well since that injury. Cook or Derrick Henry, rest of season and this week I'm going Derrick Henry. Henry's got the Jags. Dalvin Cook has the Bucks. Tampa Bay is a top 3 run stop unit. I don't think his upside is nearly as high as it has been lately. And even if he gets 38 touches again, I still don't think his yards per carry is going to be all that great. And I'm expecting 3 yards per touch or less for him in terms of a rusher. So Henry's got a much higher upside, I think, in my opinion. And is going to be much more likely to spring some runs. And I think Cook might even be a bit of a touchdown-dependent play this week. Brady or Ryan Tannehill, rest of season and this week, I'll go with Tom Brady. Brady against the Vikings, I think, can push the tempo and make them stop running the football and get into a bit of a shootout this week. So I really like his value. I think those weapons are going to do a great job. And then Tannehill's got a good matchup as well, but I just think the passing volume is what's holding him back there. Pittsburgh defense or Carolina defense. Pittsburgh, easy money every day of the week. Those guys, even though they can give up some big plays through the air, they're still opportunistic. They score touchdowns as well. So Pittsburgh's defense is very impressive. TJ Watt gets a lot of sacks. There's a lot of things going for him. Logan Thomas or Noah Fant this week, I'm going to tell you to go with Noah Fant. Logan Thomas has the 49ers, and Fred Warner is one of the better guys at covering the tight end in the league. So a matchup I'd stay away from in terms of Logan Thomas, and Noah Fant just regardless is going to do better because I think Thomas has such a limited ceiling. My league manager made me this 3rd seed, even though I was the 2nd seed because I got 1st in my seed, but a guy in the other division was 2nd in his and had more wins. Now I'm screwed this week. That sucks, man, Marco. I'm sorry he did that. He probably should have just obeyed by the rules. I got screwed over in a league as well. We had a 4-way tie for the final playoff spot in my league. I had actually beaten all of the other teams in the spot, but I had less points than those guys did collectively. I lost a lot of guys in that league. Dak Prescott, Raheem Mostert. I was without A.J. Brown for a couple games. And so ultimately I had a couple weeks that were really, really ugly and ended up missing the playoffs, actually. So I'm sorry for you, man. I hope everything works out for the best this week and you're able to pick up that win. What's going on, Roy Kim? Welcome to the stream, man. Glad to see you around here. Always can count on you, brother. Woods or Gaskin this week? I'll go with Gaskin. I think that Woods, I've talked a little bit about, has a limited ceiling and production potential against Stephon Gilmore on that Pats defense. Start Deontay Johnson or Justin Jefferson. I really like both of these guys, but Justin Jefferson against Tampa Bay right now is the better way to go. Tampa Bay is 24th ranked against the pass and wide receiver in fantasy football. And Justin Jefferson obviously is a great rookie talent. And I think if Minnesota struggles to run the football, they're definitely going to have to lean on that passing game, and Justin Jefferson is probably the most explosive option there. Brady or Herbert rest of season. I believe I put Herbert one spot ahead of Brady in my quarterback rankings list for the rest of the year that I actually put out this morning. So go check that out if you want to make sure for a fact. But I'm pretty sure I had Herbert one spot ahead because his schedule was super easy. He's got the Falcons, the Raiders, and then one more game that looks pretty dang nice for him. Let's see, Justin Herbert. He had a meltdown last week, that's for sure, but he'll definitely bounce back. I predicted that he would have a tough game against Bill Belichick. I didn't think it would be nearly as ugly as it was. He's got Denver in Week 16, so I like him the rest of the year a lot. Cam Akers or Jonathan Taylor moving forward. This is tough because both of these guys are in a somewhat committee-style offense. They're both highly talented rookies and guys I loved coming out of the draft, but at times we've seen some carries pulled from them. Obviously, Cam Akers wasn't involved nearly at all for about 3/4 of the season. And Jonathan Taylor was after that Marlon Mack injury, and then got his job pulled from him for a week or so, but he's back on track now. I think I'd go JT, though, just because he's slightly more dependable. I really like Cam Akers' talent and his ceiling, but we never know who McVay is going to deploy in a given week. Is Mike Evans good for your flex this week? Absolutely. I love that Tampa Bay schedule here going forward. I think they've got the best rest of season schedule for offensive skill players in fantasy football. I think a lot of those guys are going to produce and see really nice numbers. Should I start Justin Jefferson or Deontay Johnson this week? I would go Justin Jefferson. I think I actually answered your question earlier. You must have just commented again. Logan Thomas or Evan Engram this week. I'm going to advise you to go with Evan Engram. I think that he is a very solid guy. He might not have the safest floor in the world, but I think in terms of pure receiving talent and athleticism, he is the best guy in that offense for the Giants, so I'd go with him. Logan Thomas is a great stream option, though, don't get me wrong. It's just against Fred Warner and the 49ers defense this week. I think that's a tough sell for a guy like Logan Thomas. Pick one, Jonathan Taylor, Deontay, Jefferson, or Swift for your flex this week. I think if this is a PPR league, you're between Jefferson and Swift here. Those are guys with huge upside this week and pretty darn safe floors as well. If you're looking for a little bit of a safer guy, I'd go with Swift just because he is a running back, is going to see a guaranteed higher touch count than Jefferson will. But I think they both have equally high ceilings. My wide receivers are Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen, Brandon Ayuk, and Kiki QT. PPR pick 3. I think Diggs and Keenan Allen are locks this week. Keenan Allen's got the Falcons. He can eat those guys up and have a bunch of yards and probably double-digit receptions potentially. And then the Bills, they've got the Steelers, I believe. Yep, Bills have Pittsburgh. I think Stephon Diggs can get a deep ball or two or even a touchdown and have a really nice game. We actually got one more to pick there. I only picked 2 of the 3. At that last spot, who does San Fran have this week? Washington. So I think I'd stay away from Ayuk, Kiki QT, and PPR, especially after what we saw him do last week. I think might be the way to go. Heck yeah, Justin and Roy Kim saying it looks like we're gonna get 1,000 subs here on the channel pretty soon. That'd be awesome, you guys. If you haven't already, make sure you go down and do that. It means a ton to me, and if you guys would be willing to do that just to help me out a little bit, that'd be great. This channel has grown very fast, and I'm really pleased to see all of you guys come in here. It makes me really happy to see you guys commenting your questions, and I love helping you guys out. So thank you guys so much for the support. It really means a lot to me, and you guys have done more for me than you guys will ever know. So thank you guys so much for that. Back into some questions here. Rojo, Swift, Taylor, pick 2, half PPR. I'm going to have to go. I love Rojo. I've been talking about him all year long. I wish he would get 25 carries a game. I mean, he is one of the most physical backs, one of the most hard-nosed kids, and a guy who just finishes his runs. And he's got some explosion and some pop in his game. I wish Bruce Arians would stop trying to be an air raid team with Tom Brady and go back to that offense that he ran in New England. He's so talented, but just because of the situation he's in, he doesn't see those looks that I would like him to see. And I like Taylor and Swift's matchup a ton this week, so that's where I'd go. Saints or Steelers defense this week. I love both of those units, Nestor. The Saints ultimately, though, QB switch for the Eagles. and a not very talented offense with a terrible line. I think Philly could be in for some struggles in all their games here coming up. Start Ayuk or CEH for your flex? That is a great question. CEH has me a bit worried. He's been kind of on the ropes for me all season long. He started off white hot against the Texans on opening Thursday Night Football, but he just hasn't been quite getting it done and getting those carries and volume that I would really like to see from him. But clearly the kid has the talent. I mean, he's very dynamic. He's a great receiving back, and he's really small and shifty. He gets lost in the line, and we've seen him put his shoulder down at times too and run through some bigger linebackers. But I don't know. He's not a trustworthy guy for me. Obviously, with an illness last week, you can't fault him for not seeing a touch or a snap in that game. And I think this week against the Dolphins, he'll probably get involved again. So I'd have to still go CEH, even though there is some very major red flags there. Ayuk can be a nice level starter, but against the Washington football team defense, I'm not all over him this week. How do I feel about the Chargers? You've got Herbert, Allen, and Eckler. Honestly, that's a great offense to be invested into the rest of this season, and you've got their top three offensive weapons. I mean, Eckler, Allen, and Herbert have all been top guys at their position when available and on the field. And their schedule is great. Atlanta this week, then they've got the Raiders after that, and then they go and play the Denver Broncos in Week 16, which is close-out championship Sunday for a lot of leagues. So, you know, if you're invested in the Chargers that much, I think you're looking pretty good here, and they've got some really nice ceiling games here coming up, so I feel really good about your team if you've got those three in your lineup. They're probably all must-start players here going forward. Thoughts on Locket and A.J. Brown this week? Tyler Lockett, he's got a massive ceiling as always. I mean, we've seen Russell Wilson just pick games where it's the Tyler Lockett show and no one else gets any love in that offense. And then there's been other games where for the majority of this season it's been the DK Metcalf show, and Tyler Lockett's kind of the forgotten about man and the disrespected player in that offense. And a great matchup this week against the Jets. I mean, we saw Oakland, Las Vegas had a really nice game against them, and obviously everyone this year's had a good game against the Jets, but it's kind of that boom-bust play, and a guy I think can be great for your lineup, but also is not extremely dependable in terms of that ceiling. But then A.J. Brown, he's one of my top half wide receiver ones for the rest of the year. He's been great with Tennessee, super physical, super fast, great after the catch, finds the end zone. He's got a nose for the football. A.J. Brown's a great wide receiver option. Should you drop CEH? No, Matthew, do not drop CEH. I'm really worried about him, like I said. I don't think he's the safest play in the world, and he has some legitimate risk, but he also has a massive ceiling as a running back with that much versatility in the Patrick Mahomes-led offense in Kansas City. So he's worth hanging on to. He's a really great stream option at flex or running back 2 at this point in the season in PPR leagues. Not worth the drop, but obviously a player who's not the most dependable guy in the world. Week 14, Swift or Mostert, full PPR. I'm going to tell you to go with Swift this week. I love Mostert. He's got a great ceiling on most weeks, but against Washington this week, I'm not a big fan of that. That front seven is very elite for Washington and a group that I would definitely be worried about. Whereas Swift has the Packers. They only play one true defensive lineman at the nose tackle spot in Kenny Clark, and the rest of the guys are defensive ends and outside linebackers that line up in that front four. So great run lanes all over the place to play against the Packers. You traded Sanders, I'm assuming that's Miles Sanders, and got Evans for your flex. Is that a win or a loss? The entire point of the season up until this point, I would have told you lost that trade because I viewed Miles Sanders as a top half-level running back 1 and a guy with great upside in going forward in the season, and Mike Evans as a touchdown-dependent wide receiver 2 type player. But you know what? Evans has continued that touchdown production throughout the season. Even albeit at the 1 and 2 yard line, he has still been able to find the end zone. He's got a really great schedule here coming up. Atlanta twice, and then Detroit and Minnesota this week. Evans has a great closing schedule, and Miles Sanders has not been getting the volume he needs. So I think that's a win for you, Matthew. As much as that hurts me to say, I think Miles Sanders has kind of fallen off the train here with that Philly offense just being a disaster. Should I put Cam Newton or Russell Wilson in because Russell Wilson has been letting me down lately? I still think you go with Russell Wilson against the Jets. I mean, you can really hit the panic button if he doesn't produce against New York for you, but I would be very surprised if he didn't. Cam Newton's got about one thing going for him this year, and it's the rushing touchdown value that he's got. Only 5 passing touchdowns for Cam Newton and 69 passing yards last week. So obviously not the most dependable guy. And he has no weapons in New England either. So you go with Russell Wilson this week. What's up? Should I play Marvin Jones or Tyler Boyd this week? Is it cool if I have Cole Beasley in at flex? Absolutely. It's more than cool if you got Cole Beasley in at your flex. That means you're thinking about your lineup, and you've got a guy off the waiver wire who can be a very dependable player. I've been talking about Cole Beasley since probably, week 8, week 9, maybe even sooner than that. I'm not really sure. I have to go back and look at when I had him first on my list, but I play in a lot of 2 flex leagues. And Cole Beasley is a staple on my team because he's a guy in PPR who racks up a ton of catches and has really great chemistry with Josh Allen. So I love that play. Marvin Jones, I think, has the opportunity to be good against the Packers this week. But I think I would trust Tyler Boyd a little bit more against Dallas, even with the lacking quarterback play. Because Jones, there is the potential he sees shadow coverage from Jair Alexander, with Gallaudet likely not being in the lineup. Thoughts on DK this week? As always, DK, he only needs 3 catches to get it done, really. I mean, he can go for 3 catches, 86 yards, and a touchdown or 2. Great deep ball threat, one of the most dominant wide receivers at the point of attack, and after the catch is a nightmare to tackle. So against the New York secondary, that's pretty awful. DK Metcalf is a high-end wide receiver 1 this week. Michael Thomas or Justin Jefferson this week. It depends on what you're looking for in your lineup, man. If this is PPR, your safe floor option is Mike Thomas. The Saints are playing the Eagles, and I think Mike Thomas will have his way in that game against Slay, who's been pretty bad lately. And Justin Jefferson's the ceiling route. He definitely can put up a huge game against the Buccaneers. I believe it's 3 or 4 straight games. Justin Jefferson has 15 or more points in half PPR scoring his last 3 games. So clearly a guy with a great ceiling. Both of those guys are fantastic options. Like I said, Thomas, the floor play, and Jefferson, the guy if you're looking for a big ceiling. You need 1 in the wide receiver spot and 1 in the flex. Calvin Ridley, Deontay Johnson, Terry McLaurin, and Wayne Gallman. Okay, so at your wide receiver spot, this is a bit of a tricky one for me. It depends if this is PPR or standard for me, honestly. If it's standard, Wayne Gallman's a shoo-in for me in your lineups. But if this is PPR, I think you lean towards Deontay Johnson and those mass number of targets. So I think I'd for sure go with Calvin Ridley at the wide receiver spot. And then if you're still listening, Derek, if you're in a PPR league, go with Deontay Johnson. But otherwise, in standard leagues, I think Wayne Gallman's a great floor play. Mark Andrews or Robert Tonyan. Evan, for this week, I think that we can trust Mark Andrews pretty significantly. Robert Tonyan obviously is tied for the league lead in touchdowns at the tight end position, and I think has really emerged in that Packers offense and has Aaron Rodgers' trust. But Mark Andrews is a top 3 tight end, and so it's hard against Cleveland, who earlier on this season he had 5 for 58 and 2 touchdowns against in the opener. I think it's a tough sell to bench him. Debo Samuel or Kiki QT this week. That's a really interesting one. I think you go Debo just because we've got more of a sample size on what he can do. Whereas Kiki QT as a rookie played a little bit, but last season was pretty much irrelevant. Excuse me. And then Debo's got some rushing value. He gets some jet sweeps and whatnot, so I think he's got a bit of a better floor. Robert Woods, Myles Gaskin. Been leaning on Gaskin since he's facing a lot of suspect run defenses, and Woods is facing a red-hot defense. Yeah, I agree with you, man. I think Robert Woods is somewhat limited in the production we're going to see this week against the Pats and Myles Gaskin. Obviously, if Miami gets blown out by Kansas City, then it's going to be a different story. But if they keep that game close, and I think they should, because that defense is playing pretty good football right now, I think we end up seeing a pretty decent game out of Myles Gaskin. Should I go with the Panthers versus Denver this week, or should I stay with my current 49ers versus the football team? And do you like the Browns after this week 15 rest of season? Let me actually check in on Cleveland's schedule here. I'm not entirely familiar with their schedule here down the stretch, even though I look at this stuff like every day. I just struggle to memorize it off the top of my head. Okay, week 15, they've got the Giants. The Giants are more of a defensive football team. And then the week 16 game, they've got the Jets. So staying in New York 2 weeks in a row. Browns, they have a legit pass rush. They've got enough help in the secondary where they can get some takeaways at opportune times. So definitely a option you could go. This week, though, I think I'd probably go Panthers against that's tough. I think Carolina could get some turnovers against Denver, a team that's not doing so hot offensively right now. But San Francisco could also do the same thing against Washington. Akers, Gurley, or Sanders? Oh, gosh, it keeps scrolling down on me. I've been having this problem all stream long. Akers, Gurley, or Sanders? This week, I honestly think you go Cam Akers against the Pats. Last week, Austin Eckler just didn't really have the opportunity to run enough times because their team got absolutely hammered early on, and they never recovered. But he was averaging 4.5 yards per touch, or per carry, rather, before he really was removed from being a relevant running back in terms of the rushing game because they were down by so much. But Todd Gurley, that knee issue, big red flag. I don't want any part of that. And then Miles Sanders against the Saints is a really tough matchup. So I think Cam Akers is better to go here. And then Gaskin or Boyd this week. If you're looking for the high upside guy with the risk of him having bad quarterback play and a low floor, I think you go Tyler Boyd because he can probably bully those DBs in Dallas with the safer options, Gaskin this week. You've got Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, and Aaron Jones. Should you be able to ride them in the championship? You're in a 14-team league. Zach, if you're in a 14-team league and you have Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, and Aaron Jones, how on earth did you pick up those players? I mean, you must have drafted, Derrick Henry in the first round, Dalvin Cook when he was in his holdout, and we didn't know if we'd see him this season, and then Aaron Jones' draft stock was down a bit this offseason, so it's understandable if you got him in the third. But in a 14-team league, those rosters are going to be so deep that having 3 RB1s and high upside ones at that are going to be lethal in your lineup. Not too big of a fan of Cook's ceiling here with those tough games against Tampa and New Orleans, but he's going to get the looks and the volume to be still fantasy relevant, and he'll get touchdowns as well. All right, we've got PewDiePie, not the real deal here, I don't think, but Joe Mixon or Miles Sanders for this week. Joe Mixon, I don't think, is playing last time I checked. Yep. Joe Mixon won't return this week, but could return this season if he is readily available. Sanders, I don't love this week at all, but if Mixon comes back, I think we'll see him get more touches than we're seeing Miles Sanders get right now. I traded Stephon Diggs and Myles Gaskin for Evans, Robinson, and Hunt. Did you take a W or an L? All right, Matthew, so you got the best running back in this trade in James Robinson. I would argue that Stephon Diggs is you got rid of Stephon Diggs. I would argue that you devalued your wide receiver position, but Mike Evans has a great fantasy playoff schedule here, so in terms of right now, it might be a bit even. And then Kareem Hunt is a solid flex or running back 2 spot in a given week. So I think it can be a win, just considering that there's only 3 weeks of the season left. But if this was a trade made week 1, then you probably ended up losing it. Pick 4, Dobbins, CMC, Carson, Harris, Akers, Gurley. All right, I'm going to go with Dobbins, CMC, Carson, and Akers. Harris, I think, is seeing less and less opportunities in that Pats offense, just with having so many crowded guys in that backfield. And then Todd Gurley's got that knee injury that's bugging him and holding him back a little bit. So he's been a touchdown-dependent guy all season long in the first place, but right now with that knee, he's really struggling. What are your thoughts between Deandre Swift or Allen Robinson at my flex? So Allen Robinson is probably the safer option here. Deandre Swift has missed 2 games with a concussion and an illness that started back on Thanksgiving Day. It was the first time we saw him miss, I believe. And then, I don't know, Robinson has a great matchup against Houston without their top corner. And if you're looking for a safe option, that's the way to go. I mean, Robinson's been a must-start wide receiver 1 the whole season long. And against Houston has a great ceiling. Swift, a bit more risky, but a guy I think has an excellent ceiling as well. It's just a matter of preference. If you really want to reach for the stars and go for that high ceiling in Swift, or if you're comfortable going with a slightly lower and safer option in Robinson. Do I think Antonio Gibson plays in Week 15? Most think he's out for sure this week. Yeah, Gibson's doubtful for this week. He's got turf toe, and turf toe can actually be quite nasty. I'm a Packer fan. Last season, Devonta Adams got turf toe, and I think he missed 3 or 4 straight games. So we might not see Antonio Gibson for the rest of the year, especially at a high contact position like running back. I would have loved to see him back on the field if he's able to be healthy and himself out there in Week 15. But obviously, the organization has to take into account this guy might be a franchise running back here for the next season or two, and they don't want to risk his future and lay it on the line and make an injury worse than it needs to be. So maybe they're conservative about Gibson. I hope he's okay and that he'll be fine. But yeah. Youssef, no problem for helping you out, man. Glad to have you on the stream. Thanks for dropping a question down here, and hope you enjoy the channel so far. Reed, what's up, Reed Faldy? You've been on the channel here for quite some time as well. He wants to know if JT, Swift, Ridley, Jefferson, or Ridley in standard. You put Ridley in there twice, man, but no worries. If you can only pick one, I think this week you're in standard league. I would probably end up going with Justin Jefferson. But if you could pick two, I would try and toss either Swift or JT in there. Those are all great options. This is probably in one of your smaller leagues because those are some really, really good options for a flex. But I really like Jefferson against Tampa Bay as a super high upside pick. And Jonathan Taylor is a very safe floor play. Pick 2, Akers, Booker/Jacobs, JK, and Connor. The Pats have not been so hot against the run game lately, so I think Akers deserves a spot there. And then the Raiders are playing the Colts front. That can be a shaky matchup. But then J.K. Dobbins also has the Browns. I think you go J.K. just because of the talent differential. I think Dobbins is going to be a top-end RB next season. I think Engram will no longer be in the picture in Baltimore, and I really like J.K. Dobbins out of OSU. So Booker, I think, will end up being the starter right now for the Raiders going forward for at least this week because Jacobs is not really looking good to play this week. But I would probably go Akers and J.K. That's a tough choice, though. Start 3, bench 1. Hopkins, Diggs, Jefferson, and Ridley in PPR. You're going to start this week for sure Justin Jefferson, Calvin Ridley, and then that last spot comes down between the Giants and the Cardinals, between Hopkins there or Diggs against the Steelers. I think Diggs has the better upside right now. Josh Allen's playing better quarterback than Kyler Murray is. That's not Kyler Murray's fault. He's got some tough matchups and an AC joint sprain in his shoulder. There's nothing you can really do about that. I mean, your shoulder's not ever going to heal when it's injured, especially at the QB spot in his throwing arm. So he's going to continue to aggravate that injury every week, and it's not going to get any better for him here until the season's over, and he might even have surgery. So Murray's definitely down on my rankings right now, and so is Hopkins for that reason. I think he definitely deserves to be considered for lineup spots still, but ceiling is way down. You traded Kelsey and Amari Cooper for Ridley, Gaskin, and TJ Hawkinson. Was it a good trade? I've got TJ Hawkinson as my rest of season tight end 4 and Travis Kelsey as my rest of season tight end 1. I think Kelsey and Hawkinson have a huge gap between them, though, even though the rankings are close. Kelsey is far and away the best tight end in the league right now for fantasy football. But I like that you traded away Amari Cooper. I think that's a risky play and not a dependable guy in lineups. So I applaud you for getting Ridley and Gaskin out of that deal. I think you certainly got enough value. No problem, Derek. Thanks for coming around the stream, man. Glad to have you here on the channel. You need a flex this week, Tyler. Michael Pittman, Sterling Shepard, Tyler Boyd, or Damian Harris. Tyler, I think you should go with Tyler Boyd this week. The Tyler to Tyler connection, if you will. Boyd, despite having shaky quarterback play, has the Cowboys this week, and that's a secondary he can go all over. So 1 catch for 72 and a touchdown last week before he got ejected against Miami. Clearly, he is a good enough player to get the job done. I traded Kamara for Kelsey. Was this a win? It depends who you have at the other spots in your lineup for running back. I mean, I think I would have stayed with Kamara here if I were you. Kelsey is the best tight end in fantasy football, and I think Kamara is a top 2 running back in fantasy. But it's harder to come by those running backs and those elite level ones at that. I know there's only Kelsey, Waller, and Andrews out there in that elite tight end tier, if you will. But I like hanging on to the running backs just a little bit more. And that was 2 weeks ago. If it was 2 weeks ago, it was probably prompted by some low game production with Taysom Hill in the lineup. So it's understandable why he did it. But if Brees comes back, then I think Kamara's value skyrockets again. Drop J.K. Dobbins for Cam Akers. No, I'd hang on to J.K. Dobbins. These are both really good rookies. They're very talented players. They're going to shoot up draft stock in draft boards next year. I would look to hang on to both of those guys. Going to stream for about 15 more minutes here, you guys. Thank you guys for tuning in so far in the stream, and I'll answer as many questions as I can here before the time is up. Getting a bit tired right now, and the questions are seemingly heating up here as we get deeper and deeper into the stream, but maybe I'll go a little bit longer if I end up catching a second breath of wind here. But you've got Herbert, Kamara, Swift. Hang on, I think I just skipped a bunch. I don't want to leave anyone hanging here. Okay, here we go. Pick 2. So this must be a super flex league with more than one starting quarterback spot. You've got Herbert, Carr, Taysom Hill, Matt Ryan, Trubisky. And thank you so much for telling me to play Derek Carr. Yeah, last week he did great against the Jets. He had a really, really good game. And obviously scored the game winner with 5 seconds left. This week, man, I think you should go with Herbert. He's got a great matchup against the Falcons. Taysom, we got to wait and see if he's going to end up starting for the Saints this week. And if he does, I think is a great option for your lineup. Otherwise, I'd probably go with Derek Carr again. That Colts defense is trending down right now, and they've been struggling lately. So giving up some big games to Tennessee, Green Bay, and then last week Houston had a lot of yards. So James Conner, Akers, or Clyde in your flex. I think you go Cam Akers, honestly, is the safest option this week. James Conner, coming off COVID, missing 2 games, and against the Bills front is not a matchup I like. Akers, I think, has his way with that Pats front if the Rams stay in the game. How would you feel about Allen and Diggs this week? Because my friend has them and I'm playing him. Josh Allen is going to have the opportunity to have a high ceiling if he doesn't turn the football over, but that's what the Steelers do so well. And at times he's been kind of a pick monster. He's very talented. He's got a great arm talent, but I could definitely see him turning the football over 2-3 times between strip sacks and picks. But Diggs, I think, will have a nice receiving game as well. You trade Le'Veon Bell for David Johnson, win or lose, that's a big win. David Johnson is not an elite running back by any means, especially at this point in his career, but Le'Veon Bell is basically useless fantasy garbage right now. He's a wasted lineup spot, and there's really no fantasy relevant, or at least high-end fantasy relevant running backs in that backfield right now in Kansas City. I wish Clyde was, but that's just not what we're seeing right now with the amount of volume they're willing to give to him. James Conner or Myles Gaskin. I'd go with Myles Gaskin this week. I think he has the safer floor of the two, and I think he can put up a very nice game against the Chiefs. Thoughts on Russell Wilson the rest of the year? He's way down in my rankings right now. If you go on the channel and check out my rest of season quarterback rankings, he's definitely a guy with the talent. He's got the offensive personnel to put up really great numbers, but he just hasn't quite been getting it done the last 2 weeks, only 14 points in back-to-back games. So that's a bit of a disappointment. You got Herbert, Kamara, Swift, Jefferson, Thielen, Kelsey, D-Hop, Colts, D, and Myers is my kicker. PPR, how do we look going into the playoffs? That's a great group. Your quarterback, a top guy in my opinion. Justin Herbert has a great schedule. I think he can turn out strong here down the stretch. Kamara, if Brees walks back on the field, instantly a top 2 running back play, and even with him off the field, I think is still a high-end producer. Deandre Swift, Justin Jefferson, 2 guys I think are league-winning players here with extremely high upside. And then Adam Thielen is also a guy who gets a lot of volume and has a very safe floor. Kelsey's the best tight end in football, and DeAndre Hopkins is highly talented as well, and that Colts defense has been good. So your team's looking really good. Do you drop Antonio Gibson? No, Reed, I'd hang on to him because if he comes back and is able to play like himself, he's going to be an RB1 player. So hang tight, trust the process there, and see how things turn out. If he goes in the IR, then you can drop him, but for now, be patient with him. Gosh, I just scrolled all the way down again. You need 1 running back spot in 1 flex. Robert Woods, Terry McLaurin, Melvin Gordon, James Conner, J.K. Dobbins, or Miles Sanders. Honestly, at that 1 running back spot, I could see going Melvin Gordon here. Huge yardage game against the Chiefs last week. And if he finds the end zone, has a pretty nice ceiling. I'd be a little bit concerned about his floor, though. You could also go J.K. Dobbins route, but then at your flex, I would definitely go with a wide receiver, and I think Terry McLaurin's the way to go there. And someone in Larry's league dropped Joe Mixon, and he's wondering if he should prioritize Mixon as a pickup over J.D. McKissic. If you need a running back this week to go out and start in a PPR league, if you're desperate at the position, sure, go out and pick up McKissic. They use him in the slot, honestly. He's a very dynamic piece in that offense. But if you're looking for a stash away that might be around for the fantasy playoffs, it might be a sneaky play, Joe Mixon's your guy. He was one of my favorite guys at the trade deadline. I thought he had great upside, great schedule here, was being used highly in that offense under Zach Taylor. So, great upside pick there if you get Joe Mixon on your squad. Got any info on when Kittle will be coming back? Bought really low for him just for the chance he makes it back for the playoffs. Zach, I think he's actually expected to be available week 17 is the earliest I heard, but that's nothing official, obviously. So, if your league goes until week 17, you might be able to get one game out of him. But otherwise, you might not be able to use him this year. But if you're in a keeper league, that's a great trade. Gallman or a UCAF PPR, 100% Gallman this week. I love his floor. He's been used highly in that Giants offense. Great play this week. Start 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a flex. Mostert, Jonathan Taylor, CEH, Sanders, Ridley, McLaurin, Godwin, Deontay. Wow, you've got a lot of wide receivers there. At RB, I think you're going to have to go with probably JT and Mostert this week. I don't trust CEH right now off that illness, and Sanders has a terrible matchup. And then at wideout, I'd probably go Godwin and Ridley. McLaurin could be in there, but San Fran's been good at points this year. Pick 3, Ridley, Deontay, Terry, or MT. I'm going to go with MT as a safe floor play. Deontay Johnson is another safe floor play. And then I'll go with Ridley again over Terry. I like both of those guys. That's a really great group before we've got there, Adam. But I think you want to play it a little bit more safe in the fantasy playoffs. Manage your risk and reward. Go for guys with high upside, but you also want to have safe enough floor that you don't just totally crap out and have a terrible week. Will Lutz or Giants kicker need to win this game? Every point counts. I think Will Lutz will have a lot of opportunities to kick field goals against the Eagles. Philly's defense has been pretty poor at points this season and given up a lot of yards. But their defense is good enough where they make teams stall out in the red zone. So I think Lutz is an extremely accurate kicker as well. So that's a little kicker analysis. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. No, you're welcome, Tyler. Thanks for stopping around the stream. Will Kelsey get me 20+ this week versus Miami, who tends to be a strong defense against tight ends? Miami's a pretty strong unit against all players in all positions. I think overall the 20 points thing is probably only possible if you're in a PPR league. Is it possible that Kelsey gets 10 catches, which is already 10 points in PPR, a touchdown, and 40 yards, which would get you 20? Yeah, for sure. But in a standard league, when you're looking at 140 yards and a touchdown or 80 yards and 2 touchdowns, that's a little more tough against a good unit. But he's definitely the safety blanket for Mahomes and his favorite target. So there is a chance. It's not the most likely thing in the world, obviously, because 20 points is quite a bit. But if there's anyone to do it, it's probably Kelsey or Waller. No problem, Nestor. Thanks for stopping around the channel. Jonnu Smith, Evan Engram, or Gronk, full PPR week 14. I like all these guys. They all made my top 12 tight ends for the rest of the season, which is up on the channel right now if you want to go check that out. But I don't know, man. If Jonnu plays this week, I like him against the Jags. He had a huge game against them in week 2. I'll pull up his stats just to refresh your guys' memories and myself. He had 4 for 84 and 2 touchdowns, 22 fantasy points and half PPR against the Jags the first time around. I think that's a really nice way to go. Otherwise, Gronk has been trending up lately, but who knows how that Tampa offense will look coming off the bye. I'd stay away from Engram this week, though, and Daniel Jones' first start back. Did you know that one of my opponents rigged Taysom Hill in his tight end spot and has 2 QBs playing at the same time? Your thoughts? That's pretty trashy. I mean, I could see if they pulled it off in ESPN the first week when he was a starting quarterback. But at this point, I think it's like declared as an illegal fantasy move. So there was actually repercussions. Someone said in the chat that if you played Taysom at tight end going forward and didn't move him out, the points wouldn't actually count in ESPN. But I guess if you're playing in ESPN and he's still doing that, then that must not be true. But Taysom Hill probably not the starter this week if Drew Brees comes back and practices before the game. So his time doing that little scheme there might be coming to an end here. What do you do with Matt Ryan? Oop, scroll down again. What do I do with Matt Ryan? I think Matt Ryan is definitely a guy who still warrants some starting level respect in fantasy, but 3 touchdowns in his last 4 games is not good at all. Obviously, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Hayden Hurst, really great offensive weapons, but he has been struggling. That red zone offense has not been good, and I think their lack of ability to run the football really makes them predictable offensively. So teams are dropping back in coverage, and it's limiting his ceiling right now. I've got him around my QB 13 range for the rest of the season. I think he's not the highest upside guy in the world, but he's also not going to totally tank your lineup. But yeah, I would try and not start him, but he's better than a lot of options out there. Pick 3 to start: Montgomery, Eckler, T. Higgins, Amari Cooper. I'm going to go with Cooper, Eckler, Montgomery this week. I think Cooper can do pretty well against the Bengals, even if William Jackson covers him. Montgomery has been in a hot streak lately, and Austin Eckler, a super safe floor play in PPR with that receiving volume. Gurley or Gallman this week. Trevor absolutely going with Gallman this week. Gurley's knee injury is a big issue for him, and that can really slow him down. He's been touchdown dependent all season long, and Gallman has been highly productive. What's going on, Paige? Thanks for joining the stream. What do you think, or who do you think has an easy time versus the Chargers, Ridley or Julio Jones? Julio seems to get targets early. I have Ridley ball out and then give me a egg. Yeah, so Julio, I think, definitely draws the tougher coverage, if that's what you're asking, because he's still a top 3 wide receiver talent in the league, despite the injuries and the declining production we're seeing from him right now in that offense. But I think Ridley has that offense open up for him a little bit more in these tougher matchups where they have really one dominant alpha corner, and then the other team, or other parts of the team, tend to play a little bit more passive zone coverage. So I think Ridley sees a better matchup, and I actually have him ranked higher in my rest of season rankings because Julio tends to be banged up here at this point in his career. What's going on, Undisputed Queso? You're always checking in on my videos on supporting the channel here. Your potential lineup for the playoffs is Herbert, James Robinson, Gallman, and J.K. Dobbins, Michael Thomas, Deontay Johnson, Corey Davis, Flex, and Evan Engram, Daniel Carson. What are my thoughts? If you're going to go out there and start, obviously Herbert's a must-start. Your top 2 running backs this week are Gallman and Robinson, and then Michael Thomas. And honestly, Deontay Johnson are great options at wide receiver. And then for your flex, you've got Corey Davis. Yeah, I like that group. Corey Davis has a good upside this week. Obviously lower floor because of that low passing volume in Tennessee, but that's a really good lineup for you. Can I trust Tyler Locket with a bad game script? To answer that one, I would say probably not. Tyler Lockett's always got a huge ceiling, but if they blow out the Jets, he's not going to do too much work unless he is a part of that blowout early on. Sebastian says he's got a week 14 thanks to me. That's awesome, man. I'm glad I was able to help your team out. Congrats on getting the bye. Obviously, you had something to do with that as well. So, congrats, man. Thanks for joining the stream and being a part of the channel. Sorry if this was already answered. Is Hilaire worth starting over someone like Akers, McKissick, or Hines? I think I'd go Akers or Hines over him this week, honestly. That illness is still kind of affecting his practice time right now. And I think Hines against the Raiders is going to be able to do some work as a receiver this week, and Cam Akers should see a decent yards per carry against the Pats. So those guys are probably more dependable. Dallas Goedert or Hunter Henry this week. I'd go with Hunter Henry against the Falcons. I think Goddard has a tough matchup against the Saints, who have been playing very good defensive ball lately. Just trying to wrap up some questions here before I head out. Can you trust Keenan Allen and Eckler in the playoffs? Absolutely you can. That Chargers offense has a great schedule here coming up for fantasy. Atlanta, Denver, and Las Vegas left on the schedule, all favorable matchups. Tanyan or Mark Andrews this week. Also, is Lamar coming back to his 2019 season, or is this just a bad offense? Lamar is going to carry that unit. He's got some decent matchups that he can exploit here down the stretch. Mark Andrews, a great option. I'd go this week his way if he's healthy, and I think Lamar can certainly put up great numbers. Gronk or Mark Andrews? I got you, man. Mark Andrews, if he's healthy this week. I love Gronk's matchup, but Mark Andrews against the Browns was great earlier this season. Andrews, Tanyan, Jonnu, Engram, Ebron, Thomas, pick one. I'm going to go with Andrews first, and as an emergency option, I'd go Tanyan because of that high touchdown count. What are my thoughts this week, James, on Swift, Taylor, or Gallman, Debo, Juju for flex? Just need one. So I'd go Swift against the Packers. I think he has a great ceiling in that game. But if I was going to go with a not-so-flashy pick and a really safe option, I think Gallman's the way to go there. All three of those guys are players I love this week on my top 5 must-start running backs list. That'll be coming out early tomorrow morning. All right. I'll do 5 more quick questions here. I was gonna head out, but they're still coming in here. So, we've got AJ against the Jags or Julio against the Chargers. I'll go with AJ Brown against the Jaguars. I think he can get some high production off the play action ball. CEH, Dobbins, or Booker in my flex. It's a half PPR point league. I think you go with J.K. Dobbins here this week, even in a tough game against the front of the Browns. Booker was a bit disappointing in his first start last week, and CEH did not take a snap, so I think Dobbins is your safest bet there. He actually did rig him when he was at tight end and quarterback. He put in a tight end, and now I think he wants to keep him out there. Taylor Hill is so he got locked into the lineup spot. That's his fault. He shouldn't have tried and played Taysom Hill at tight end. Pick 2 non-PPR, Cam Akers, Booker, Debo Samuel, Bernard. I know it's bad. It's all right, man. Everyone's got to stream someone eventually, and with running backs dropping like flies and all the injuries and COVID this season, depth is certainly an issue for a lot of teams. I'd go Cam Akers, though, for you. I like Bernard's matchup, but they see Samaje Perine and that offense a little bit too much for my liking, so I think Bernard's touchdown upside is limited. But I do like Cam Akers against the Pats. Bold prediction, Mark Andrews goes for 80-plus yards and 2 touchdowns. It'll be hard, but so possible against a struggling Browns defense. Yes, Bold Fire, I agree that is definitely a bold prediction, but not too bold. He had 58 and 2 tubs against the Browns earlier this season, so he can definitely get it done. 2 weeks of rest, I think he might come back pretty strong here. Chubb against Baltimore or Zeke against Cincinnati. I think Zeke is the safer floor play because of how we might see that game play out for the Browns. If they get whooped up early, Chubb will have a low ceiling. But I think Chubb has the higher ceiling but a lower floor. I'd probably start Chubb though. Despite that, I think the Browns are playing pretty good football right now, and I'd trust that offense. What do I think about T.Y. Hilton? Well, this week he's got the Raiders. Love that matchup. I think he's a solid wide receiver too. And then I forget who his next matchup is, but he made my waiver wire list, and I loved it as well earlier. Yep, Houston, week 15. Another great matchup. He had 8 for 110 and a touchdown in week 13 against them. T.Y. Hilton's a wide receiver too for the next 2 weeks. Miles Sanders, Corey Davis, or Chris Godwin at flex. Go with Chris Godwin. Great matchup against Minnesota there. Youssef, again, thanks for helping me. I am starting Russell Wilson, Wayne Gallman, James Robinson, Michael Thomas, Tyler Boyd, Cole Beasley, Seahawks defense, and Will Lutz. That's a great lineup, man. I think that should do you pretty well here unless your opponent this week in the playoffs gets really hot. I need to send 2 more players to the waivers. I have Connor in a reserve spot, and I want to pick up Cam Akers off the waivers. Melvin Gordon, J.K. Dobbins, Miles Sanders, Antonio Gibson, or none. I don't think you can send any of those guys to the waivers, man. I don't know. It's tough. They're all starting level running backs. That's a tough one for me. I could see maybe dropping Gordon for him. Maybe Miles Sanders, but someone else is probably going to snatch him up unless you're in a really small league. So I'd be careful with that. Thanks. Love the list, man. No problem, James. Thanks for stopping by the stream. Most underrated fantasy content creator. Good stuff, bro. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Obviously, that's thanks to you guys. You guys are out here supporting my channel and helping me grow, so I really appreciate all of you guys for all that you guys do for me. Pittman or T.Y. Hilton. This week, I go T.Y. Hilton. I love that matchup that he's got there. I think he can do some big things against the Raiders this week. Thanks, bro. Have a good night. Yeah, you too, Bloodfire. Thanks for stopping by the stream, man. Very underrated channel. Thank you, bro. That means a lot. I'm hoping to get out a lot of great content for you guys here as the season winds up to an end here. This off season, I'm going to devote a lot of my time to research. I'm going to put a ton of my time into making that draft guide and giving you guys a much better experience in the 2021 season. If you guys are happy and satisfied with what I've given you guys here this season, I think your expectations will be raised next year, because I've got a lot of big things in the store for you guys, and I'm hoping to go even bigger and better next season. So I'm going to keep the foot on the gas pedal and certainly looking to get better here every day for you guys. Last couple of questions here. Deontay Johnson or Tyler Boyd? That's a great question. I think Deontay Johnson's the safer route to go, though, just because of how many targets he gets, and Big Ben is a much better quarterback than Ryan Finley. But I love Tyler Boyd's ceiling a bit more than Deontay Johnson. But I think in a playoff game for many fantasy leagues, you want the safer route in Deontay, who also has a nice touchdown upside. Is Michael Thomas still a safe wide receiver one? Captain check down Drew Brees returns. Absolutely. I mean, we saw Michael Thomas be the wide receiver one last year with him, and a guy who had the record for most receptions in a season. So even if Brees is captain check down, it's going to be to him and Alvin Kamara. So obviously Drew Brees is not what he once was, but yeah, I think Michael Thomas can still be solid. I mean, Taysom Hill is basically a running back, if you want to say that. So MT still had 200-yard games with him at QB. Hope you reach 100 or 1,000 subs. Thanks, Yusef. Hopefully I get there pretty soon, man. Grinding out a lot of content, a lot of late nights this week. I'm riding on about 4.5 hours of sleep in the last 2 days trying to get out content for you guys, and being a full-time student and worker. Most of these channels are biased, and I can tell you actually take your time to give us legitimate facts and correct stats. Yeah, I get a lot of flack sometimes. I put some pretty hot takes out there. Like last week, I said sit Herbert and Keenan Allen. I was low on Murray and Hopkins last week. A lot of guys didn't like that, and I understand a lot of you guys can't sit those players because they have been must-starts to this point in the season. But I'll put myself out there, and I'll call it as I see it. I mean, I truly want to give you guys the best content I can and not water down my takes for you guys. So, oh, Adam, sorry, man, I did not mean to skip your thing. Jonathan Taylor, Miles Sanders this week. Adam, you should go with Jonathan Taylor. I think Miles Sanders is a pretty darn tough game here, and JT has a much safer floor. Sorry about that, man. Thanks for calling me out there. I got you covered. Akers, David Johnson, or James Conner. I would go with Akers this week. I could also see David Johnson being a legit play against the Bears, but I think I like Cam Akers' yards per touch here against the Pats. Swift or Gaskin? Brandon, I think you go with Swift this week. I think he's got a great ceiling against Green Bay. Should I get Graham Gano or drop Will Lutz? I think you stay with Will Lutz here, man. I think Will Lutz is one of the better kickers in the league. Yeah, anytime, James. Thanks for stopping around the channel, man. I love your fantasy insight, and you bring up some really good stats and a really great viewpoint in the comment section of my videos. So much respect to you, man. I feel like benching Robert Woods because of Gilmore. Thoughts about this? Kevin, great thought. I think Robert Woods' floor is still safe because of how many targets and how he's involved in that offense, but the ceiling is not there this week against the Pats and one of the better corners in the league. How do we enter the giveaway? Reed, I'll be getting into that once we reach 1K here, but I think what's going to end up happening is I'm going to come out with either a live stream type video or an actual video where you guys go in the comments, and then I'll be putting those names that are subscribed and comment down like giveaway or something in the comments into a generator. And the first 10 names it spits out to me are the guys that I'll be contacting. I'll probably need an email address because I think that's how you guys are going to get access to the draft guide. But I'll definitely get into that once we get there. Julio or Woods? Go Julio this week. I don't love Woods against the Pats. Good work, brother. I'm going to head out for the night. Yeah, same here, Roy. I'm out of here in a minute here. So thanks for stopping by, man. I know Swift is coming off a concussion and illness, and Gaskin is going to get all the touches right. Yeah, Myles Gaskin should have more touches. Maybe a safer floor, but I still think Swift, if he gets that workload back, has the higher ceiling. I know it's a risk being out for the last 2 games and having multiple ailments, but love the matchup. No problem, man. Love your channel. Thanks, Adam. It means a lot, man. Sorry I missed you again. Definitely did not mean to do that. Sorry, last question. Godwin or Ayuk? Definitely go with Godwin this week. The matchup against Minnesota is far more questionable. Oh, Roy's got one more question. I got you, man. Tyler Bass for a kicker. He faces Steelers defense. Should I start him? I think Buffalo can drive on this team. I think they can score points, and I think Tyler Bass is a great option if they stall out drives. So I think that's solid. Drop Gibson. Reed, I'd hang on to Antonio Gibson. I think Gibson with a turf toe, it might be unlikely that we see him again this season in the fantasy year, but if he comes back, he's definitely worth it. Yes, Eric, tell your friends to subscribe to my channel so I can hit 1K here. Once we hit 10K, or 1K, geez, 10K is a bit off. Once we hit 1K, I will be doing that draft guide giveaway. So tell your friends, subscribe to the SFS channel, and we will get rolling here. Feels good, got Jefferson last round in the draft, and I am locking him. He's been amazing. He's been the best rookie wideout and the most impressive guy in a loaded draft class. And he didn't even win the best receiver in the nation last year, and that was his teammate Jamar Chase, who took this year off to prepare for the draft, so he might be a monster as well. Cam Akers, our CEH. I'm trying to get all of these questions in here so I can end the stream, and you guys just keep firing away. Cam Akers, our CEH, though. I'm going to go Cam Akers against the Pats this week. What's up? Man, I need a better flex. I have Debo. What should I do? I think Debo can be solid this week. I think he has a solid floor, but if you're looking for other options, go into your waiver wire, give me some flex options for you, and comment that on one of my videos so that it'll be here after I end the stream, and I'll make sure to get back to you at some point, either tonight or tomorrow morning. Brandon, you're going to go subscribe right now. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me, and you are really helping me out here, so thank you so much for that. See you later, Reed. Thanks for stopping by, and much respect and appreciation, homie. Thanks for making a great content and really answering all of these. Yeah, no problem, man. I try my best. I try to get to all of you guys. Every single one of you guys that stops by here means a ton to me, and it helps me out so much. So thank you guys so much. I think I'm gonna end the channel, man. End the stream on that note. Thank you guys so much for stopping out tonight and watching the SFS Q&A. I'll be doing another 1 or 2 of these before the week is over. So yeah, thank you guys so much. And I'll see you guys later. If you have any more questions, put them in the comment section on one of my videos, and I'll be notified about that, and I can get to you guys some point before the week is over. Definitely sometime tonight or tomorrow morning. So thank you so much again. Stay tuned for tomorrow. I've got top 5 wide receivers and running back lists to go out and start this week. So that's something you should stay tuned for as well. Without further ado, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much. Peace out.